Hey there, Math 8. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Math with Mullins. Today we're looking at our quiz review for lessons 5.1 through 5.4. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is talk about each one of these square or cube roots. The square root of 36 is 6. Square root of 64 is 8. Square root of 100 is 10. Square root of 169 is 13. And the square root of 81 is 9. For 289, that should be 17. Square root of 144 is 12. The square root of 196 is 14. The square root of 256 is 16. And the square root of 225 is 15. The square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 is 2. 49 square root is 7. 121 square root is 11. Keeping it going here, we have the square root of 25 is 5, the square root of 400 is 20, the square root of 16 is 4, the square root of 361 is 19, and the square root of 324 is 18. Now we're going to talk about our cube roots. The cube root of 343 is 7, the cube root of negative 1 is 1, the cube root of 64 is 4, the cube root of 1000 is 10, so negative 1000 means negative 10. Cube root of a positive 27 is 3. 729's cube root is going to be 9. Cube root of 125 is 5. The cube root of 512 is 8. The cube root, but make that negative, sorry. Cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. And the cube root of 64 is 4, just a repeat from that. So kind of just a drill and practice. Now we're going to approximate each square root to the nearest whole number. So if you think about 217, it's pretty close to 225. So we're going to say that's around 15. And all these are approximations. 84 would be closest to 81, which is 9. 55 is on either side of 49 and 64. 49 to 55 is a 6 increase. 55 to 64 is a 9 increase. That's closer to the square root of 49. So that's going to be around 7. Go ahead and circle these since we're going to be showing some of our work here. 111 is in between 100 and 121. It's only 11 away from 100, but it's 10 away from 121. So we're going to say it's closest to 11. 163 is in between 144 and 169, closest to 169, meaning 163 square root is closest to 13. 146 is also in between 144 and 169, but closer to the 144 side, so that's going to be around 12. 274, that's going to be your between your 15 squared and your 16 squared, actually 16 squared, which is 256, and your 17 squared, which is 289. 274 from 289 is a 14 integer jump, and 274 and 256 is an 18 integer jump, so it's closer to that 289. So we'll say the square root of 289 is 17, so 274 is probably closer to 17. 102 is really close to the square root of 100, so we're going to go ahead and say that's 10. 91 is right there in between 81 and 100 perfect squares. It's only 10 away from 81, but 9 away from 100, so we'll say that's about 10. And 188, that's going to be in between that 13 squared and 14 squared. 14 squared is 196, 13 squared is 169, and 188 is only 8 away from 196, but a little bit more from that 169. So yeah, this one is a 19 integer jump, this one's only 8, so we're going to say the square root of 96 is closer, so that's going to be around 14. All right, put each set of numbers in order from least to greatest. Remember, the best way to do this is put these all in decimal form. So we're going to say 9 over 6, if you divide that, it's negative 1.5. 8.9 is already there. Negative square root of 16 is negative 4. 6/3 is 2. We're going to say the square root of 7 is kind of in the middle because we have like the square root of 4, and then the next up is square root of 9. So 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's closer to 3. So we can say maybe that's like 2.8 and then negative 8.3. Okay, start with our negatives first. Negative 8.3 is that biggest negative. So check that one off. Then my next biggest negative is this negative 4, which is the negative square root of 16. Then my other negative, which is negative 9/6 or negative 1.5. Now let's talk about our positives. I have 2, 2.8, and 8.9. 2 is at 6/3. Then 2.8, which would be that square root of 7. And then finally 8.9. So there's your order for this one. I am curious to see square root of 7 on a calculator if I guess that one right. Next up, ones I need to change. Negative 2.3 is good. 0 is good. 21 over 7 is equal to 3. Pi is 3.14. And negative 7 1/5 is negative 7.2. Again, starting with my negatives, biggest negative is 7 1/5. So that'll be first. Then I've got negative 2.3. Then 0. And then 21/7 and pi. Cool. Putting each numbers in order from least to greatest again, starting with changing them all to decimals. The negative 3/9, that's going to be negative 1/3, so negative 0.3 repeating. I have 6.6, negative 8. 9/5 is 1 4/5, so that's 1.8. The square root of 75, I've got 64 on one end and 81 on the other end. It is closer to 81, so we're going to guesstimate that's like 8.8, almost 9. So we'll say 8.8 and then pi. Okay, negatives first. Negative 8 is my smallest one, so that's negative square root of 64. Then my negative 3/9. I'm going to cross those off so I don't pick them again. Next up, I have 1.8, which is at 9/5. Then 6.6. Oops, no, pi is next actually. Did not write pi as a decimal. Tricky. Pi, then 6.6, and then last but not least, that square root of 75. Okay. Over here, square root of 36 is 6, negative 4.2, 9.6, 9 over 9 is 1, negative square root of 81 is negative 9, and negative 7 2/5, that's negative 7.4. Start with your negatives first. Negative 9 is the biggest one, so negative square root of 81, cross it off. Then negative 7 2/5, cross it off. And negative 4.2 is my last negative. Now I can focus on those positive ones. I've got number 1, which is 9/9, cross it off. Then the square root of 36. And then last but not least is that 9.6. Okay. Circle the classifications that apply to each number. So this first one, 8/7, that is a fraction. So it can only be rational. Negative 80 is not natural. It's not a whole number, but it is an integer. And because it's an integer, it's also included rational. Remember, one way you can do this is draw a line between rational and irrational, because we talked about if it's an integer, it's also rational, but some people get in the habit and they're like, oh, it's irrational too, and they keep circling everything. No, put the line there so you stop after rational. Square root of 5 is not a perfect square, so that one has to be irrational. 0 over 16 is equal to 0. So it's not a natural number, but it is a whole number, which means it's an integer and also a rational number. 24 over 6 is equal to 4. That is a natural number, whole number, rational, integer, and rational. And then the cube root of 67 is not a perfect cube, so we'll say that one's irrational. And again, trying these, negative 48, not natural, not whole. So it is an integer though, which means it's a rational number. 2/6 is equal to 1. third, that's just rational. The negative square root of 49, that's negative 7. Not natural, not whole, but it's an integer and rational. 4/4 is equal to 1. That's a natural counting number, which means it's a whole number and an integer and rational. 10.6 is a decimal, just rational. Negative 36/9, that is negative 4. So starting at integer, ending at rational. And the cube root of 27 is equal to 3. So that's natural, whole, integer, rational. That's going to conclude our quiz review for lessons 5.1 through 5.4.